Hi everyone, it's Professor Wood here. Just wanted to annotate the poem with you, The Charge of the Light Brigade. I'm a little underprepared today, so I apologize in advance. First thing I'm going to do is staple my paper, and we're going to annotate the poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade. There's a couple of things you need to know at first about the poem, and I apologize. Let me see if I can't get this thing to just keep the autofocus on. But one of the things that you need to know about the Charge of the Light Brigade is that this particular poem is based on actual events. This was a poem that was written in 1854, so I always try to provide a little bit of historical content here when I am looking at a poem. It is based on real events. It was based on the Crimean War, the British versus the Russian. Um, this particular poem is relatively long. It's 6 stanzas, so it's one of the longer poems that I ask you to read. A couple of things to notice is that it does have a lot of repetition in it. It was written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. He was, at the time, the poet laureate of Britain, meaning that he actually wrote poems for the King of England at the time. So, having that little bit of context and information, this poem was inspired by a newspaper article that he had actually read. So, having that information as you're going in, the first thing I always ask you to do, of course, is to number the lines. We know that it's in 6 stanzas, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So as we go down, I'll number as we go along. But notice I said it's in 6 stanzas. So one of the things I always ask you to do, of course, is to do the mist as we're going through. But I'm going to read the poem to you first, and then we'll go from there. So half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the light brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade! Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well. Into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke. Gothic and Russian reeled from the sabre stroke, scattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them leapt of the 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, wild the charge they made! All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made! Honor the Light Brigade, noble 600. So just looking at that after reading it through one time, you can tell this definitely is a great poem to pair with the Dulce et Decorum Est because they are complete and total opposites. Where Dulce et Decorum Est is an anti-war poem, this is a poem that glorifies war. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a couple of notes here. I'm going to put here that he was the poet laureate of Britain. And then I'm also going to make sure that I am aware that it is based on real events. The Crimean War. and that was British versus Russians. Okay, so having that information as you go into it and begin to look at that, look at the poem and look for the devices, because when you're writing about a poem, you always want to look at the devices. Structure is extremely important and so we want to make sure that we are focusing on structure as we look through, because we don't just look for the devices, we can also write about the structure. So the first thing you need to note is that the poem is in chronological order. So I'm going to switch colors here and just make a couple of notes here. I'm going to put that it's in chronological order. Okay. I'm also going to put the type of poem that it is. It is a narrative poem. It tells a story. It does have a bit of a fast rhythm. Now, certainly I'm not a professional poem reader. I can annotate and look at poems and be able to discover meaning, but it's extremely important that you are aware the pace of it and know that his intent was to make sure that his audience, the British people, knew that the rhythm is very fast. Bam, bam, snap, snap. It's supposed to mimic the galloping of horses, because these individuals would have been on horseback during this time. And so it's critically important that you are aware of that. So that's another part of the structure. It has 6 stanzas. Certainly, there's some rhyme scheme in it, and I know that's one of the first things I taught you is to always look for a rhyme scheme. But there's not a consistent rhyme scheme. So at this point right now, we're not even going to look at trying to look at the rhyme scheme. We're just going to read the poem and find the devices and see what we can't come up with as far as big ideas and themes in the poem, and then we're going to mist it towards the end. So if you notice right off the bat, I'm going to use pink, no, purple, because, purple is my favorite color, for repetition. So half a league is repeated here and here and here. We also have Valley of Death repeated. And then we also have 600. So 600 soldiers, that's the amount of soldiers there are. So I think with the repetition, typically repetition is not just repetition of words, it's also repetition of ideas as well. So half a league, half a league, half a league onward. Valley of Death, 600, Valley of Death, and 600. So first of all, the Valley of Death is definitely considered a metaphor. But if you are, and Tennyson's audience would have mostly been very, very, very Christian and religious, the reference to the Valley of Death is also a biblical allusion. So I'm going to put that here. Biblical allusion of Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So it's not only a metaphor for marching into death, because Tennyson obviously knew what had happened when he wrote the poem, because, as I said, it was based on a newspaper article and based on true events. But it's most definitely a metaphor for that, and it's a reference to the 23rd Psalm. So we have that. We also have the 600 that he wants to, because he repeats it, he's emphasizing the amount of people. So I'm just going to put emphasis on how many there are. Okay. We have this in the first stanza. We've got forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said. So here we have instructions that are being given by someone. So if you know anything about this particular event in history, you know that someone gave them the wrong instructions and told them to go to the wrong place. And so that's critically important to know. The 600. Okay, here we go again. We have some repetition. Forward the Light Brigade, forward the Light Brigade. I'm going to, of course, highlight this and highlight this as repetition. So I'm just going to put an R there. And, or repetition, I'll just write the word out. And again, going along with, I use the purple for repetition, but because they're also instructions here, I just want to change colors there. Now, was there a man dismayed? I think that's a really interesting thing to add here into the poem. Not though the soldier knew. Okay, so this is a rhetorical question. So I'm just going to note here that this is a rhetorical question. And a rhetorical question, of course, is a question that has the answer repeated, or the answer right after that. Not though the soldier knew. So I don't think he's being sarcastic here per se, but he's certainly answering the question. And he said, not that the soldier knew someone had blundered, because the soldiers weren't aware. So he answers his question that he asks in line 10. Now, we have a little bit of a shift there, and I'm going to go back to my repetition. And I'm going to get my purple highlighter back out and highlight the words, there's not to make reply, there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. And then we've got, again, Valley of Death and 600. So it's almost like a refrain here that we're dealing with. Valley of Death and 600, that again, a biblical allusion reference. So I'm just going to put refrain. And a refrain is in a song, so it's kind of like a chorus. Into the Valley of Death rode the 600. There's not to make reply, there's not to reason why, there's not to do, but do and die. Really important here, not just the repetition of the word there's referring to the soldiers, but it's basically saying it's not their job to question. It's not their job to ask why. It's their job to go and do what they're supposed to be doing, which is to be soldiers. The word choice here is critically important because he's got the words do and die. And I think it's an interesting choice of conjunction here. He's got the word and instead of or. And that's his word choice there is really important. Because do or die or do and die. Like they didn't know. I mean, their job was not to question who had given them the instructions, but their job was to be soldiers, and they know the choice that they make when they are soldiers. And of course, it's what it is still when they have conscription, mandatory service. So there's but to do and die. So and instead of or there. Going on to the third stanza, we have more repetition. We have cannon to the right of them. So you're looking at a battle here. Cannons versus swords. Cannons versus swords, because during the British soldiers were not armed. That's why they were called the Light Brigade, not because they were carrying lights, but because they were armed lightly. So they're carrying swords, but they're going against cannons, which were pretty powerful. So the word cannon there, I think Tennyson was trying to emphasize the hopelessness here. Of cannons versus swords. Okay, and he's using the repetition here of cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them to create that big, powerful sort of meaning and understand his audience to understand that the cannons versus swords pretty. Okay, then we've got volleyed and thundered. So volleyed and thundered, switch colors here, go back. Purple. Volleyed and thundered is an onomatopoeia. Okay, so we have the onomatopoeia here, and then we have stormed at with shot and shell. So I'm going to get a different color here. Of course, we all know I love purple, so I have a lot of purple, but I'm just going to grab this random green here. Stormed at with shot and shell. Oh, interestingly enough, it is army green. So we have an alliteration here. And again, you have the juxtaposition here with cannons shooting at them. And then it says boldly, boldly, that adjective, that very powerful adjective here is telling the audience, the people that are reading this poem, boldly they rode and well into the jaws of death, into the jaws of hell. So I'm going to pull out my blue highlighter here because this is most definitely, it's a metaphor, but it's also vivid, very vivid imagery. Here with the, of course, you know, the valley of death, jaws of death, the valley of death, jaws of death. You have repetition of the word death, but this is definitely a metaphor for death. And then it's vivid imagery. And then, of course, we have that lovely little line, rode the 600. So I'm going to just make sure that rode the 600. So he definitely wants his audience to know that 600, you know, that 600, how many of them, you know, and again, I just realized I missed something here. Was there a man dismayed? The rhetorical question that he's asking up here is they know they're going to die. And we have a metaphor for death, you know, the jaws of death, the mouth of hell, some sort of monster here. They're going into a monster. And that can be construed two ways. You know, going into a monster could be a monster as in monster battle, or they're going into a monster, they're going into hell, they're going to die. All 600 of these soldiers. So that's the first three stanzas. Now, remember, this poem is a narrative poem. It's telling a story. It's in chronological order, and there's 6 stanzas. So we're going to go over to the 4th stanza here. And we've got the words repeated, again, another repetition, and you can't really see it with the document camera, but I'm going to do my best. Flashed and flashed. Okay, so again, flashed all their sabers bare. As I mentioned earlier, with a little bit of historical knowledge, this was swords versus guns. So flashed their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there. So again, we have sabers and sabering. It takes, they're just holding their swords. They're holding their swords out, and they are fighting, charging an army. Wow. All the world wondered. Okay, so we've got a little bit of alliteration there. So world and wondered is alliteration. And again, all the world wondered. Everybody was wondering what was going on. So I'm just going to highlight that line. And he's glorifying here. So again, the whole thing has been a glorification, but plunged in the battery smoke. So the smoke, the imagery of this battle here, right through the line they broke. So again, you have that. And then you have Gothic in Russian reeled from the saber stroke. So again, you have some alliteration right there with saber and stroke, but it is emphasizing their bravery. So this line, and remember, you have to keep in mind that Tennyson was the poet laureate. So he was writing for the king. So it's emphasizing their bravery. Again, we've got shattered and sundered, more alliteration here, but it's also a metaphor. Because at this point, these soldiers, then they rode back. So we got a shift here. Then they rode back, but not, keyword, not. And then it's repeated, not the 600. So not everyone lived. Okay, so you have that information here. So again, we have that shift because they're fighting. They are not giving up. Again, like I said, with the repetition, it's not just words, but also ideas. They are outgunned. They knew, like they said in the previous stanza, there's not to question why. With their man dismayed, that was the rhetorical question. They knew they were going to die. So that's of critical importance. Now, again, we have that repetition in stanza 5, cannon, 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 cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them. Again, that is a repetition of stanza 3. So just going to make sure that that is notated. From the third stanza there. But they're on their way back. Because remember, there was a shift there in the 4th stanza. So the repetition from the 3rd stanza, they're on their way back. And again, volleyed and thundered. Also repetition. You have a caesura here as well with the semicolon, which is an interruption in thought, but it's also an onomatopoeia here. Stormed at with shot and shell. Alliteration. Okay. Now, while horse and hero fell, more alliteration here. And I'm just going to put an A there because I'm going to actually pull up the highlighter here. While horse and hero fell, because the idea of the hero. So here we have the idea, and I'm going to use red. I'm going to switch colors. I know for those of you that are OCD will go bonkers, but the idea of a hero, is glorifying war. So again, like I said earlier, when I first started this video, in this sense, in Dulce et decorum est says that old lie, it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. Well, Tennyson is saying the direct opposite. He's saying it is heroic to die in service to king and country. So, while horse and hero fell, he's glorifying it. And then that had fought so well. So again, that's that next line there came through. And then we have again the jaws of death and the mouth of hell. Very vivid imagery here. All that was left of them, left of 600. So again, not the 600, left of the 600. So here in this, Tennyson is focusing on the living. not the dead. Okay, so we have that here. And then going further into the final stanza in stanza 6, here we have when can their glory fade? So we have that rhetorical question here that we had in the first stanza. We'll highlighter again. Oh, the wild charge they made. So here we have a shift in the perspective here. I'm just going to put RQ as an abbreviation for rhetorical question. Oh, the wild charge they made. Again, that immediate answer. All the world's wondered. Again, we have that statement. I'm going to highlight the word charge because it was a charge. They did charge. And then we have a repetition again. Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade, the Noble 600. So here in the last stanza, you have, it shifts perspectives. And you have the narrator's commentary. Okay. And he's basically saying, never forget them. Okay, that's what he's saying. Never forget them. So just want to kind of put some of the big ideas out there. So I'm going to put big ideas. And these are potential themes, big ideas. So we have patriotism. We have nobility. We have sacrifice. We have remembrance. And we have honor. So those are the big ideas. Now, is that a theme? One of these could certainly be themes. Two of these, all of these combined together with all of your annotations certainly could. Now, as we miss it and look at, and I'm going to do the miss on the front page just to make things a little bit easier. So remember, M, I, S, T. So when you're missing something and you are looking at it, you're looking at several different things. You're looking at M stands for mood. And so what I tell my students and always have is it a Wahoo poem or is it a Boohoo poem? This could be a combination of both because you have the negative connotations, the word with the valley of death, the biblical allusion, the metaphors for death. But I'm going to take a leap here, and I'm going to say this is a Wahoo poem because it is glorifying war. So I'm just going to say Wahoo. Now, obviously, when you're writing a formal paper, you're not going to say the mood of this poem is Wahoo. You would say the mood for this poem is glorifying war and making it, therefore, a representation of the good things about war and the good things about being fitting to die as a hero for one's country. Now, the I stands for imagery. And so imagery, there's multiple images in this poem. So I'm just going to put Valley of Death. I'm going to put 600, and I'm not going to write out 600. I'm just going to write out the number. Guns, sabers, and even I would say probably death. Now, it does not vividly describe death, but it is an image that I can see. And I'm also going to put the horses because those are all things that I can see. Now, at this structure, we went over the structure. So if you look up here, you've got, it's in chronological order. It's a narrative poem and it's 6 stanzas. The first thing that I'm going to put is that there's no discernible rhyme scheme. 6 stanzas. and that it's a narrative poem, and it's chronological. Now, when you're writing a poetry analysis, especially, you want to look at structure because structure is extremely important. Poets structure their poems for a specific reason. You know, I've talked about this in class several times and I've mentioned it, but there are some people that do their poems, some poets that have written in concrete poetry, so their poems are in shapes. There are poets like E. Cummings who write their poems using and breaking every single rule of syntax and punctuation known to man. Um, you know, so it is important to note the structure. Is there a rhyme scheme? How many lines is it? How many stanzas is it? Are they in quatrains? Are they in tercets? I mean, there's lots of different things to look at, but structure is definitely something you want to focus on, especially in this particular poem, because you do have that refrain, Valley of Death and 600, it permeates throughout the entire poem. Now, as far as theme and tone, that's when you go to look at your big ideas. Tone is the author's attitude towards it. So again, you have that sort of a glorification tone. You have that very much a patriotic and very prideful tone that the author has. So I'm going to put the tone is prideful. And the theme goes to your big ideas. So depending upon what you're wanting to write about, if you want to write about the patriotism and the nobility and the sacrifice that these soldiers made based on poor directions, you certainly could. So I'm just going to put patriotism. This is theme. Nobility, sacrifice. And I'm just repeating the big ideas that we wrote on the other page. And then honor, which goes right along with nobility. But those and that is the beginning of how you could write a literary analysis. Just having this basic information, this mist, having that information to be able to begin to write a literary analysis. So that is Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred Lord Tennyson, wrote in 1854. And I hope this has helped you understand the poem a little bit more and really made it make a little bit more sense. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week, and maybe you'll end up writing about this poem. Who knows?